Welcome to module 1.3 of section 1 on warehousing risk. And in this section, we've learned already to see the signals, the surface signals that are going to kind of tell us, hey, we really need to look at something. And this is our first section where we're going to dive into exactly one of the most powerful, easiest ways to identify warehouse risk. Okay. And it's going to confirm what we saw on the surface. And this tool is literally our first line of defense. Okay. And that is going to be the two versions of your account. And they're basically balance and equity. Okay. Some of you guys understand this really well, and you don't have to be like a very sophisticated investor or have a lot of experience to understand it, because the simple reality is it's just like owning a home, or if you've ever considered buying a home, there's equity in your home, right? People say, yeah, I've got equity in my home. And the thing about equity is it's just like equity in your home. You own the home, and the home is worth, like, let's say, $250,000. All right. But you haven't sold the home. All right. So you haven't realized that profit or that sale of the home. So you have a balance of what you owe the bank, right? Or the balance that's in your account that's on your loan, but you might have equity, and that equity could be up positive. That's a nice feeling, or it can be negative, and that's not good. And in general, that's the same thing that your trading account does, right? You have a balance, which is the closed positions, right? So your balance only changes when you close entries, whether you win or lose. And your equity is the real time value of your home. So you might own a home and you bought it for 500,000, and but the market is on a downturn. So your equity in the home is estimated to be 400,000. In investing, that equity is actually a known number because there's a price that everybody knows that the current asset is buying and selling at. So we have a much more accurate picture, but it works the same way. All right. So this gap between balance and equity, okay, is the unrealized losses that are sitting in an account. All right. Now, sometimes it could be unrealized gains, but in this case, when we warehouse risk, it's always on the downside, which is really problematic, right? Very, very negative for the system. So the smooth equity curve, all right, shows you a beautiful picture. Underneath is this, I'm sorry, the smooth balance curve shows you the beautiful picture. And underneath is the real story of this equity curve, which is showing you the real risk the system is experiencing in its history and currently. Okay. And that is the big thing that we're going to talk about. There's two versions. So how does this convert to something that's really dangerous? Okay. Well, the idea is that if you have published drawdowns, if they're showing you drawdowns, a history on the balance, those drawdowns can look really small. They can look almost non-existent. They can be like, hey, we've only ever had a 5% drawdown. What they're saying is we've only ever realized a 5% loss from peak to trough, right? If you know what drawdown is. And it's just simple as like, how much has the account gone down from its starting point or its highest balance since it closed a position. But the actual drawdown history could be quite a different picture if we look on equity, okay? This could be extremely different. You could have 40, 50, 60, 70% drawdown. And in Steven's case, that could have easily have been a history that he could have seen that, well, if I had a $400,000 account, I can easily be drawing down and be in exposed to $172,000 at a time. And as we discussed, in order to evaluate systems, we need to see the real risk. And so what's really happening here is risk is being hidden from us because of the warehousing risk. And so if we don't understand this concept, we can't make informed decisions about how good a system really is for us or anybody for that matter if we don't really see the real risk that's happening. So why is this the earliest tell? So the gap that we see, right, from a balance to an equity curve, why is this the earliest tell? Okay. It's something that shows up right away, even before there's a realized loss, even before a system blows up. You guys can now have a tool that you will immediately recognize. Whoa, this system is warehousing a lot of risk. That means I have a lot more risk than's probably being presented in the numbers. And you can immediately get that before anything happens to you. And it's so powerful. So if there's one thing that I want anyone to take away from this section and this entire course, it's this, okay? It's really the fastest way to spot if a system has no real edge. Systems that have real edge don't need to warehouse risk because they know that they will win over time, and they don't need to just hold positions and pray that they come back. All right. So when balance and equity curves are separating and the separation is very large and it's very consistent, okay, it's really that the system is trading noise. In other words, it has no edge. It's just holding, and it doesn't want to take losses, and it doesn't have a real edge. All right. It also is the big one, right? It tells you what's coming next. When a system is warehousing risk, this is an important concept. Okay. Then, and it's not taking its losses, it doesn't have any risk management. Capped, there's no capped risk for it to perform. So it tells you what's coming next, which is eventually that system will damage your account in a big or a humongous way, or completely decimate it. Okay, that's a fact. I know it's something that some of you guys might have to, challenge your own beliefs right now. But I really encourage you, because this is a course that's really showing you what's really happening. My, decades of being in the market, guys. I know this stuff like the back of my hand, and it's very serious, and it's not really special. Any serious investor, any serious quantitative person who understands mathematics knows that statement is not a it's not an if, it's a when. And we'll talk more about it. So the one question that we do, what's our tool, right, that we can quickly ask ourselves or ask for somebody who's presenting a product to you, is your reported drawdown calculated from balance or equity? And that's just an important case study, because like if they are reporting it from the balance, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just needs to be reported, or you just need to understand that it's reported from there so that you can check, hey, does the equity curve follow the balance curve really closely? Because then there wouldn't be any distortion there. If it doesn't, then you need to ask, well, what's the drawdown from equity? And if you can't see the equity curve, then you still need to ask, well, can I have the equity curve? Okay. So this is a huge indicator. All right. It's so easy. I'm going to show you examples in a second. So what does it look like when the line tracks together? Okay, so we see in this line, right, where there's lots of gaps and there's huge space and it comes and goes. And sometimes I'm about to show you some examples. Excuse me. I'm about to show you some examples, guys, where there'll be open positions, warehousing risk for 6-9 months at a time. Most of the time, it might not be that long, but it's still a long time. What does it look like when the lines strike together? Okay, that's a system that's realizing its losses, that is not exposing you and not hiding risk. So it's the warehousing of risk is not there when a balance and equity curve are very much in line. Okay, and this one's funny because it's not a completely accurate diagram. The balance and equity curve should eventually come back very often and meet, right, when we don't have an open position. This chart actually shows that there's an open position like the entire time, which is not exactly accurate, but you get the point. We wanted to show you that when they track closely together, that's what you're looking for. Okay, and that means that drawdowns are realized, that there's many small discrete entries. Okay, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 positions, usually never more than that on a single asset in the single direction, because it's building a position, but not extreme. And that lets you know there's transparency. Okay, so I will show you that. I'm going to actually give you an example directly from some of the work I've done, and then I'm going to give you some examples from stuff people brought to me. All right, so again, here we go with warehouse risk. This is what we'll see, the split, right? Balance, beautiful, looks pretty. Equity, whoa, what's going on here? And a real system, this is actually, a good example of what can happen. Again, the lines are just separated a little too much. They would usually come back together frequently as those positions close. Okay. All right, so we've talked about, okay. So we talked a little bit about the divergence and the one question, but how does it confirm it really? Okay, when the scenario is they only show you the balance only, okay, the system, we don't know. We have to investigate further. Okay, so the kind of logic here is the system may be holding open losers, but we don't know yet, because the equity curve will show us. If they deny showing you the equity curve, which is pretty rare, but in some cases they really will not, and they will say, we don't want to show, or we don't have that. And that's probably a good sign that there's warehousing risk, because they don't want you to know there's unrealized losses that they're not exposing. Okay. The other thing would be the simplest scenario is when you have both, you don't even need to ask. That's the beauty of our system, and what I'm teaching you in this course. When you have both and you can see it on a chart, which we're about to go over an example, then you don't even need to ask. You know what it is, guys. You know it in literally 5 seconds. So that's the beauty of signal one, the detection tool number one, the balance and equity curve divergence, is that it's an immediate confirmation of what you're seeing. It doesn't mean that those curves will never diverge. Okay, we'll show you an example of what it looks like to have a real divergence in a real system, and what it looks like to have warehouse risk, and it's going to be so obvious to you. So let's get right into the examples. Can't wait to show you. Okay, so this is where the course gets really cool, because these live examples, and again, you'll be able to ask me questions, and we do calls all the time, and I'm happy to get on with anybody and go over any topic anyway, and review live things, because this is where the rubber really meets the road. So first time we're looking at live stuff here. This is from it's not necessarily the count that's important, I don't know, but this is from one of the greatest examples in a very serious situation where over $100 million was blown up, okay, recently, with one of these martingale systems, okay, and grid systems, okay. So really important concept is, you probably are familiar and you've seen this kind of chart, right? Very beautiful, very impressive performance, smooth balance curve. But if we look deeper at it, we can immediately now see, and you're probably seeing for the first time, well, what is that yellow line? This yellow line is the equity curve. And some of you are familiar with MyFX book. It's a very popular publishing site that's public, and people can publish the results, right? So the MyFX does usually give you the equity curve and the balance curve, which is what they're calling growth, okay? And if we zoom in, we can see quite a bit of divergence going on in very serious ways over extended periods of time. And this is the coolest part. You can begin to see what we talked about in our introduction to what warehousing risk looks like, is that this is when it starts to add positions. And these positions get very deep, okay? And the equity in the account goes down drastically. In this case, 165% is what the growth is, down to 111%. That is at least 33% drawdown. And then as the price retraces, boom, they get that profit grab on a very, very risky deep position that had uncapped risk. And this repeats over and over as the account grows. What we see when it doesn't do this is still the same thing. It's carrying a bunch of open positions, but they're very small, and there's not a lot of volatility in the market, whether the asset classes that they're trading. There's no big position. So it carries these little tiny losses, and the win rate accumulates very nicely. Okay. But immediately, okay, what we can see is that this divergence is way too big, and it carries way too deep for it not to be warehousing risk. Immediately confirmed. Okay. It's done. We know what it's doing. You can immediately now identify it in 2 seconds, which is so cool. I know you're going to love using this tool. The interesting thing, obviously, you can see this account ended on July 19, 2024. And the reason is pretty clear at this point. What happened? Okay. This account never recovered, like many don't. And, an example of this another way is this nice smooth equity curve. Okay. It has a few dips, right? So it's going to show a little bit of that drawdown before this starts to happen. Now look at this equity curve. For this account is still live, and this person, I don't know who he is or who isn't. This was just given to me by somebody as an example. Look at the open position here. It's had open positions carrying pretty extraordinary drawdown, okay, for almost a year. That's what this looks like, guys. And now you can immediately see it. Well, what is the system doing? This is not a professional system. I know right away. This is not a real system. This is warehousing risk. And you can see that it's really struggling with performance when it tries to cap that risk, which means that it took a loss. But when you cap a martingale grid system, okay, we'll talk more about it. You don't get performance like they show on the marketing charts. But this is a great example, an extreme example of what happens when you're holding and warehousing risk for extended periods of time. And this account is probably not, it looks like it's probably in a 40-50% drawdown right now. I don't know. We could do the math, but that's not a comfortable place to be. That's not risk management. That's not a real system. And we don't have to even listen to anything else. We don't have to know anything else now. Now, as a sophisticated investor with this tool, immediately you know what it is, and you don't have to waste your time with it, and then you don't have to look at it. So, boom, such a great tool. Love this one. Now, let's take a look at what a real system does. Okay, what a real system does. Okay, so obviously, I have the most familiarity with SkySail. That's what I do. But you can see something really interesting when we do the dynamics on this chart. So this is a 2+ year live history of one of our products. The first thing you're going to notice is, where's the yellow line? Okay, the yellow line isn't there because it's so close to the red line, which is the equity, that you can't see it. You can almost see it for a second. It's kind of hidden, but it's so close and it tracks so closely that it's not there. And that's and that it's not saying that it has to be zero space, guys. I really don't want to get, if you have to have distance, right, between your equity and your balance, or you can never do anything. You have to have an open position somewhere, whether it's positive or negative. Okay. And what's often funny is that in the other systems, these martingale grid systems, they have this negative dip. Oftentimes in a really solid professional system, a lot of times you can also have positive equity. So you're holding open positions, but they're winning. And that is a very different dynamic. So you'll see that. But I wanted to show you that difference. We'll get into showing you a little bit more why SkySail is different. I probably, you know what? Let's do this. I'm going to show you a SkySail Quant Lab preview of some of the work that we do, and I can show you some examples about how a real system doesn't warehouse risk and what it looks like. So actually, real quick, I want to show you another example before we get into that, which is one that this is an example someone recently shared that's still live and it hasn't blown up yet. But if we quickly do our detection tool, we can see, wow, this is on these long time periods or longer, right? This has been running for 2 years and hasn't had a catastrophic event yet. The difference between the balance and equity looks pretty close, but remember that you have to do it on relative size, and you can still see it, and it's a indicator, okay, of what's going to come. And you can see this is a good example. This is holding open positions for April 2nd to May 9th, okay? A month and a half, okay? It's carrying positions, and they get quite far away when you really zoom in. This is a 12-13% drawdown, okay? Right off the chart. I don't know how deep it really went because we don't have all of the insight, but we have pretty close to it. So the idea here, actually, I think it was like, what is this, 15%. Okay. And that's what I want you guys to look at. Don't make sure to zoom in enough to really get the relative size correct. Okay. But this system hasn't had an issue yet, but now we know that it will. And that's the key. I really want you guys to pay attention to this. I don't want to see anybody emailing me, messaging me later, and having to tell me a terrible story. I want to keep you guys away from this stuff, but it's very easy to identify even when it looks good like this. And this was a recent example of saying, hey, is this really close? And I said, no, it's not. It's definitely warehousing risk. And it looks like it's okay because it's run for 2 years without a catastrophe. But the catastrophe is coming, guys, 100%. The odds are certain it will happen. Whether it happens this year, the next 12 months, I don't know. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen twice in a year. It could happen 3 times in a week. And it might not happen for 2 years. That's how these systems have been marketed, because they fool you with this. Like the same reason Steven and every general person who it's okay to feel like, well, I didn't know. You wouldn't know. And that's what this course is really teaching you. So that's what this looks like. And then you can see that the drawdown looks reasonable right now. And that is not an indicator that should make you feel comfortable, because we now know we have a detection tool to know what's coming, what's going to happen. So the drawdown number looks good until it's too late. And that's when this happens and it drops off a cliff. 408. This is 50% drawdown. Boom. And you know what? Sometimes these accounts just take their system offline right when that happens because they don't want to ever admit that it went down to zero, guys. There was no saving this. Okay. This account did blow up. I do know that. Okay. So when we look at this stuff, I just want to make that last point so you really understand that this can look, well, it's kind of close, but if we zoom in, it's still very significant. It's still having extended time. And that's just because the reported drawdown is not yet huge. That does not mean that it's safe. That does not mean, that should not give you, you don't have to even look at this number if you look at this. And that's the cool part. So let's go ahead and dive right into an example here with the SkySail Quant Lab. Let's see what we got here. And let's go ahead and run something. This is a script that we run to kind of explore one of our products, right? Or our product in general. Okay. And it's going to do a bunch of calculations. It's going to look at a bunch of data. It's going to do a bunch of the quantitative stuff. You don't need to know exactly the specifics. If you guys want to know what we're looking at or the data, I'm happy to share it. But the important thing is the outputs here. Okay. So we're going to talk about a little bit more of this stuff, but the first thing I'll show you is that the max concurrent positions on our system over 7 years has been 3. Okay. And that's 3 in the same direction on the same asset. Okay. Which means that there's no chance that our system is warehousing risk. Okay. And we're going to talk about a few more of these things, but I wanted to give you a sneak peek. So 50% of the time, we only have a single position, which means we're not averaging down. We're not gridding at all. And the other open positions generally mean that there are separate specific algorithmic probabilistic plays that are happening that we want to get a deeper position, or we're taking sort of a coherent new position based on new data in the market. So really cool stuff. But let's get to 3 more really, really good tools on top of what you just saw that are going to help us really confirm this, look for clues, and also identify a little bit more of the nuanced versions of warehousing risk that is still martingale grid related, but could show up in different ways. So stay tuned for that. Please don't miss this whole module. It really is going to be the culmination of every tool that you can quickly use. And you've seen how this one already does it in 20 seconds. So these ones are going to be just as quick, just as painless. So let's protect our capital.